Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
Tell us, from which country or city are you watching today? We enjoy connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations of Sand. Victor Sullivan stood at the edge of his 10-acre property, watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in brilliant oranges and purples. At 42, he had built everything through relentless work and calculated risk. The construction empire he'd created from nothing now employed over 200 people. He'd married Diana Harlow 15 years ago when she was a struggling art student, and he was just starting to gain traction with his first major development project. "You're brooding again," a voice called from behind him. Victor turned to see Diana approaching, her auburn hair catching the fading light. At 38, she still looked stunning, though lately something had changed in her eyes, a distant quality he couldn't quite identify. "Just thinking," he replied, taking a sip from his whiskey glass. "Thompson wants to back out of the River Heights deal." Diana's smile faltered slightly. "The one you've been working on for months? Can he do that?" "He can try," Victor said, his voice hardening. "But I didn't get where I am by letting people walk all over me." Diana nodded, then checked her phone as it buzzed. A slight frown crossed her face before she quickly composed herself. "I need to head into town tonight. The gallery is having issues with the new exhibition setup." Victor raised an eyebrow. "The third late night emergency this month. On a Saturday night? Can't your assistant handle it? Tanya's out of town this weekend. It won't take long." She kissed his cheek, the gesture feeling somehow performative. "Don't wait up." As she walked away, Victor noticed the slight spring in her step. Something about her eagerness nagged at him. Their marriage had grown colder over the past year, with Diana increasingly absorbed in her art gallery business. He'd initially supported her venture with both capital and connections, proud of her ambition. Lately, though, they'd become like ships passing in the night. Victor's phone rang. His site manager, Liam Bennett. "Boss, we have a situation at the Westlake site. Some of the materials delivered aren't up to code." "I'll be there in 30, Victor said, downing the rest of his whiskey. As he drove toward the construction site, his mind kept returning to Diana's behavior. 3 months ago, he'd overheard her laughing on the phone, a sound he hadn't heard directed at him in longer than he cared to admit. When he'd entered the room, she'd quickly ended the call. At the construction site, Victor methodically addressed the materials issue, negotiating with the supplier over the phone with the same ruthless efficiency that had built his reputation. By the time he finished, it was nearly midnight. On a whim, instead of heading home, he drove toward Diana's gallery in town. The building was dark. No emergency, no staff working late. Victor sat in his truck, staring at the empty gallery, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. He pulled out his phone and opened the location-sharing app they'd installed years ago for convenience. Diana's location showed her at the Westfield, an upscale hotel on the other side of town. Victor drove there slowly, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He parked across the street and waited, watching the entrance. At 1:17 a.m., Diana emerged, laughing, her hand intertwined with a tall man Victor recognized immediately. Nolan Prescott, the smooth-talking art dealer who had begun supplying pieces to Diana's gallery 6 months ago. They kissed passionately under the hotel awning before Nolan hailed a cab. Diana stood, watching until the taxi disappeared around the corner, a dreamy smile on her face. Then she walked to her car. Victor sat motionless, a glacier forming in his chest where his heart should be. He didn't follow her. Instead, he started his truck and drove to his office downtown. There, in the silence of his corner office overlooking the sleeping town, he poured himself another whiskey and began to think. Victor Sullivan had never been a man who acted on impulse. His success had been built on patience, strategy, and the ability to see 10 moves ahead while others struggled to see 2. He wouldn't confront Diana immediately. First, he needed information. And then, he would make a plan. Chapter 2. Paper Trails. For 2 weeks, Victor maintained the facade of normality at home while methodically investigating his wife's affair. He hired Maxwell Reed, a private investigator recommended by his attorney, to document Diana's movements and communications with Nolan Prescott. "You don't seem as angry as most clients," Max observed when they met in an out-of-the-way diner to discuss findings. Victor's expression remained impassive as he reviewed the photographs of Diana and Nolan entering various hotels, their intimate dinners in neighboring towns. "Anger clouds judgment," he replied, "and I need to see everything clearly." The PI handed over a USB drive. 6 weeks of text messages and emails. "Your tech guy came through with those. Fair warning, they get personal." That night, after Diana claimed another gallery emergency, Victor connected the drive to his laptop in his home office. The messages between his wife and her lover painted a vivid picture of not just physical betrayal, but emotional desertion. They mocked his work hours, his dedication to building the business that funded Diana's comfortable lifestyle and her gallery. "Victor's so predictable," Diana had written. "All he cares about is adding more zeros to his bank account. He hasn't truly seen me in years." 2 more months, Nolan had responded. "Once the divorce is final and we've secured what you deserve from this marriage, we'll never have to hide again." Victor's face remained expressionless as he scrolled through their plans to take half his assets, move to New York, and build a new gallery with his money. Diana had been systematically documenting supposed grievances, fabricated claims of emotional neglect, manufactured arguments, even allegations that Victor had been verbally abusive, all carefully dated and detailed. Setting up a narrative, building a case. The next day, Victor visited his attorney, Howard Lowell, carrying a thick folder of documents. "They're planning to blindside me with divorce papers soon," Victor explained, sliding the evidence across the desk. "She's been creating a fictional record of mistreatment while sleeping with this art dealer. From what I've gathered, they plan to use Montana's equitable distribution laws to take half of everything, including my business." Howard reviewed the materials, his expression growing increasingly grave. "This is methodical. They've been planning this for at least 8 months. He looked up. "What do you want to do, Victor?" Victor leaned forward. "I want to understand exactly what I'm facing legally if she files with these fabricated claims. And then I want to know every possible way to protect what I've built." "You could file first," Howard suggested. "Get ahead of this." "No," Victor said calmly. "I need them to believe their plan is working. For now." That weekend, Diana suggested they host a dinner party for important gallery clients. Victor agreed amiably, playing the role of supportive husband. Among the guests was Nolan Prescott, who Victor welcomed into his home with a firm handshake and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Throughout the evening, Victor observed the subtle glances between his wife and her lover, noting how Nolan charmed their mutual friends and how Diana beamed at him from across the room. Victor performed flawlessly as the successful, oblivious husband, even engaging Nolan in a lengthy discussion about art market investments. "You have quite an eye for emerging talent," Victor told him, raising his glass in a toast. "No wonder my wife values your professional opinion so highly." Later that night, after the guests had departed and Diana had gone to bed, Victor went to his office and made a phone call. "I need everything," he told Max. "Every contact, every business dealing, every skeleton in Nolan Prescott's closet. And I need someone watching the gallery's finances. Something doesn't add up there. This is becoming more than a standard infidelity case," Max cautioned. "I'm aware," Victor replied. "Your discretion will be compensated accordingly." As April turned to May, Victor allowed Diana to believe that her increasingly transparent excuses were working. He listened patiently to her complaints about their marriage, recognizing each as a carefully planted seed meant to justify her impending departure. He noted how she began shifting small personal items from the house, family photographs, heirloom jewelry, sentimental objects she could claim were solely hers. What Diana didn't notice was that Victor had begun making meticulous preparations of his own. Chapter 3. The First Move. On a warm June morning, Diana finally made her move. Victor returned from an early meeting to find divorce papers on his desk, delivered by courier rather than in person. The petition painted him as a cold, controlling workaholic who had emotionally abandoned his wife. It requested half of all marital assets, including a significant stake in Sullivan Construction. Victor called Diana, who didn't answer. Her text response was brief. My lawyer advised against direct communication. This is for the best. He waited until evening to return home, finding Diana packing a suitcase in their bedroom. Were you planning to say goodbye? He asked from the doorway. Diana flinched, then squared her shoulders. I left you a letter along with the papers. I've been unhappy for years, Victor. You must have noticed. What I noticed, he said calmly, was that you've been carefully documenting false grievances while sleeping with Nolan Prescott. The color drained from Diana's face, but she recovered quickly. That's not true, and making false accusations won't help you in court. Victor didn't raise his voice. We've been married 15 years, Diana. I invested in your gallery when no one else would take the risk. I introduced you to every important connection you have. And this is how you repay loyalty. Loyalty, Diana laughed bitterly. You've been loyal to your business. Victor, never to me. When was the last time you asked about my dreams? My needs? Nolan actually sees me, not just as an accessory to his success. Nolan sees you as access to my money, Victor replied evenly. But by all means, finish packing. I won't stop you. Her expression shifted to suspicion. Just like that? No fighting for our marriage. Would it matter if I did? Diana zipped her suitcase. My lawyer says I'm entitled to half of everything. The prenup is outdated and can be challenged based on your controlling behavior. I've documented everything. Yes, Victor said. I know exactly what you've documented. Something in his tone made Diana pause, but she grabbed her suitcase and headed for the door. The court date is already set. Try not to make this uglier than it needs to be. After Diana left, Victor poured himself a whiskey and made a call to Howard. She served the papers and moved out, he said. Staying with Prescott, I assume. She's confident about breaking the prenup. Their filing was creative, Howard admitted. The judge assigned to the case is Harriet Coleman. She has a history of favoring wives in high-net-worth divorces, especially when emotional abuse is alleged. Then we have work to do, Victor replied. Implement Phase 1. The following week, Diana was unpleasantly surprised when her gallery's main supplier suddenly canceled their contract, citing business restructuring. 3 major clients postponed significant purchases. The gallery's insurance company initiated a routine audit that required extensive documentation. None of these setbacks could be directly traced to Victor, yet they created immediate financial pressure. Meanwhile, Victor appeared to be floundering. He responded to the divorce petition with a standard request for adherence to the prenuptial agreement, but otherwise made no aggressive legal moves. He looked tired in public, inspiring sympathetic glances from mutual friends who had heard Diana's version of events. He's falling apart, Diana told Nolan over dinner, showing him a text from a friend who had seen Victor at a business lunch. Howard says he's not even fighting the financial discovery requests. Nolan raised his wine glass. To new beginnings. I told you he wouldn't know what to do without you managing the social aspects of his life. What neither of them knew was that Victor had opened a new front in the war. Max had discovered that several pieces in Diana's gallery had questionable provenance. Specifically, artwork that Nolan had sourced through his international contacts. Victor had quietly commissioned authentication experts to examine documentation and ownership histories. At the first preliminary hearing, Diana sat confidently beside her attorney, Valerie Winters, a shark-like divorce lawyer known for extracting maximum settlements. Victor arrived with just Howard, lacking the team of lawyers Diana had expected. Judge Coleman frowned at Victor throughout the proceedings, particularly when Valerie presented Diana's detailed records of alleged emotional manipulation. Additionally, Your Honor, Valerie argued, Mr. Sullivan's business success was only possible due to my client's unwavering support and sacrifice of her own career aspirations. The gallery she eventually established was a mere fraction of the creative potential Mrs. Sullivan set aside to support her husband's ambitions. Victor noticed Diana dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, a performance he once would have found convincing. Mr. Sullivan, Judge Coleman addressed him directly, Do you understand that Montana law considers marriage an equal partnership? Your wife's contributions, while perhaps not directly financial, enabled your success. Understand completely, Your Honor, Victor replied respectfully. I founded Sullivan Construction before our marriage, but I've never denied my wife's support was valuable. The hearing concluded with temporary arrangements heavily favoring Diana, substantial monthly support, continued use of their vacation property, and a freeze on major business assets, pending final settlement. Outside the courthouse, Diana couldn't contain her triumph. The judge believed my lies. You get nothing. The kids hate you, she shouted as they left the courthouse steps. Though they had no children, her rehearsed script slipping in her moment of perceived victory. I won. She spat on his shoes for dramatic effect. Victor said nothing, his face impassive. Then Diana's phone rang. It was Valerie. Bad news. Victor heard as he turned to leave. The judge received a package from Mr. Sullivan, and it's not good for us. Don't do anything stupid now. As Victor walked to his car, the faintest smile crossed his lips. Phase 2 was now in motion. Chapter 4, The Package. Judge Harriet Coleman sat alone in her chambers, staring at the contents of the package spread across her desk. What had seemed like a straightforward high-net-worth divorce case had just become significantly more complex. The package Victor Sullivan had submitted contained meticulously organized evidence. Authenticated text messages between Diana Sullivan and Nolan Prescott discussing their plan to fabricate abuse claims. Financial records showing Diana had been siphoning gallery funds into a personal account. Statements from household staff contradicting Diana's timeline of events. And most damning, a journal in Diana's handwriting detailing their scheme to take Victor for everything he's worth. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Her clerk entered with another folder. The supplemental filing from Mr. Sullivan's attorney just arrived, Your Honor. This second package contained evidence that 3 valuable paintings in Diana's gallery, sourced by Nolan Prescott, had questionable provenance. External authentication experts had provided affidavits suggesting they might be sophisticated forgeries. Judge Coleman removed her glasses and pinched the bridge of her nose. She had initially sympathized with Diana Sullivan, finding Victor's calm demeanor somewhat cold. Now she wondered how much her own biases had influenced her preliminary ruling. She picked up the phone to call both attorneys for an emergency hearing. Across town, Diana paced in Nolan's stylish loft apartment, her face flushed with anger. What exactly did Victor submit? She demanded as Nolan poured her a glass of wine with slightly trembling hands. Valerie doesn't know yet, Nolan replied. The judge sealed it temporarily, but she said it's bad, really bad. Valerie warned we might need to prepare for a complete reversal of the temporary orders. Diana hurled the wine glass against the wall, red liquid streaming down like blood. That's impossible. We were careful. Were we? Nolan asked quietly. You told me he was oblivious, that he was too absorbed in his business to notice anything. He was. Diana insisted, though doubt crept into her voice. For months he didn't question my excuses or late nights. Maybe, Nolan said, he was playing along. That same evening, Victor sat in Howard's office reviewing their strategy. Judge Coleman was shocked, Howard reported. She scheduled an emergency hearing for tomorrow morning. The art authentication reports were particularly effective. They've opened questions about potential fraud beyond just the divorce proceedings. Victor nodded. And the financial tracking? Howard slid a document across the desk. Diana's been moving money from the gallery accounts, about $180,000 so far. Some went to her personal account, but nearly half has been transferred to offshore accounts we believe are connected to Prescott. Good, Victor said. Make sure the FBI Art Crimes Division receives the authentication reports anonymously. I want that pressure point established, but not publicly connected to me yet. Howard looked uncomfortable. Victor, I understand your desire for justice. But are you sure about this approach? Courts generally prefer clean settlements, even with evidence of misconduct. Victor's expression hardened. This stopped being about money the moment I read their messages mocking me in my own home. Diana and Nolan believe they're smarter than everyone else. I'm going to correct that misunderstanding. The emergency hearing the next morning was closed to the public. Diana arrived looking considerably less confident, with both Valerie and a white-faced Nolan flanking her. Judge Coleman got straight to the point. "Mrs. Sullivan, I've reviewed evidence suggesting you fabricated abuse claims and misappropriated funds from your gallery business. Mr. Prescott, there are serious questions about the provenance of certain artworks you supplied. Before we proceed, I strongly advise both of you to consult with your attorneys about potential criminal implications." Diana started to protest, but Valerie gripped her arm tightly. "Your Honor," Howard interjected smoothly, "my client wishes to make it clear that his primary concern is resolving the divorce equitably. While the evidence suggests potential criminal violations, Mr. Sullivan prefers to address those matters separately from the divorce proceedings, if possible." Victor caught Diana's eye across the courtroom. For the first time, he saw fear there, the realization that she had severely underestimated him. Judge Coleman nodded gravely. "I'm reversing the temporary orders effective immediately. Mrs. Sullivan, you will return any marital property in your possession. The financial freeze on Mr. Sullivan's business assets is lifted. Additionally, I'm referring the art provenance questions to appropriate authorities for investigation." Outside the courtroom, Diana approached Victor, her earlier bravado replaced by desperation. "Victor, please, we need to talk privately. This has gone too far." "Has it?" Victor asked mildly. "I'm only getting started." Nolan stepped forward. "Look, Sullivan, maybe we can work something out. The gallery has potential. Diana has talent. We could structure a settlement that benefits everyone." Victor regarded him with the same expression he might give an insect. "Mr. Prescott, I suggest you worry about the FBI Art Crimes Unit that's currently reviewing those 3 Degas pieces you authenticated. I understand forgery carries significant federal penalties." As color drained from Nolan's face, Victor turned and walked away, Howard matching his stride. "That went well," Howard commented, "though I'm not sure threatening them openly was wise." "It wasn't a threat," Victor replied. "Just a preview." Chapter 5, Count to Moose. By the following week, Diana's carefully constructed world was crumbling. The gallery's reputation took a significant hit when rumors of authentication problems spread through the art community. Major clients quietly distanced themselves. Her credit cards, previously paid from joint accounts, now frozen to her, were declined at a high-end restaurant where she was dining with potential investors. Nolan, meanwhile, received an official letter from the FBI requesting interviews about the provenance of several artworks he had sourced internationally. His normally smooth confidence gave way to increasing panic. "We need to separate our situations," he told Diana during a tense dinner at his apartment. "My attorney says I should distance myself from the gallery operations while this investigation is ongoing." Diana stared at him in disbelief. "Distance yourself? This was your idea. You assured me these pieces were legitimate." "Lower your voice," Nolan hissed. "I never guaranteed anything. The art market has always operated in gray areas. You knew that. I knew nothing of the sort. You told me these were incredible finds from private European collections." Nolan's expression hardened. "Your naivete isn't my problem. I'm trying to protect both of us. By throwing me under the bus?" Diana's voice rose despite his warning. "Everything is falling apart, and you're already planning your exit?" "Don't be dramatic," Nolan said dismissively. "We just need to be strategic. Victor's clearly been planning this for months. We need to be equally careful." Diana grabbed her purse and stood. "I trusted you. I left my marriage for you." "You left your marriage for half of Victor's money," Nolan corrected her coldly. "Don't pretend this was some great romance. We both saw an opportunity." Diana slapped him hard across the face, then stormed out. Alone in her car, she finally allowed the tears to come. Everything was collapsing around her. The gallery she'd built, her reputation, her financial security, and now even her relationship with Nolan. For the first time, she considered that she might have catastrophically misjudged Victor Sullivan. The next morning, against Valerie's explicit advice, Diana drove to Victor's office, determined to speak with him directly. His assistant, Pamela, regarded her with undisguised contempt but buzzed Victor nonetheless. To Diana's surprise, he agreed to see her. Victor's office remained, as she remembered, meticulously organized, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city he had helped build. He stood as she entered, his expression unreadable. "You have 10 minutes, he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. Diana had rehearsed a speech, part apology, part negotiation, but facing Victor now, words failed her. "The gallery is failing," she finally said. "My credit cards are maxed out. Nolan is." She trailed off, showing his true colors. Victor suggested, his tone almost conversational. "Funny how quickly rats abandon a sinking ship." "I made a mistake," Diana admitted, swallowing her pride. "A terrible mistake. But destroying everything I've worked for won't fix anything." Victor leaned back in his chair. "The gallery is failing because your lover supplied it with questionable artwork and because you've been embezzling from its accounts. Your credit cards are maxed out because you've been living beyond your means without my income to support you. These are consequences, Diana, not punishment." "What do you want?" she asked desperately. "To humiliate me? To watch me lose everything?" "What I want," Victor said quietly, "is for you to experience exactly what you planned for me. To lose what you've built, to be betrayed by someone you trusted, to realize how completely you misjudged a situation." He checked his watch. "Your 10 minutes are up." Diana remained seated. "I'll drop the divorce proceedings. We can work through this." Victor's laugh held no humor. "You still don't understand. I don't want reconciliation. I want you to face the natural consequences of your choices." As security escorted a sobbing Diana from the building, Victor turned his attention back to his computer screen, where he was reviewing updates from Max about Nolan's increasingly desperate attempts to distance himself from the questionable art transactions. That afternoon, Diana received notice that the gallery's landlord was terminating their lease due to concerns about illegal activities that might violate their contract. The building's insurance company had apparently received anonymous information about authentication issues with the gallery's inventory. Simultaneously, the bank holding the gallery's business loans initiated a review based on financial irregularities, freezing remaining operating funds. Without inventory, location, or operating capital, Diana's business effectively ceased to exist overnight. When she called Nolan, desperate for support or at least consolation, his number had been disconnected. Chapter 6: The Revelation. The art world thrives on scandal nearly as much as it does on authenticity. By the time the Montana Arts Journal published its exposé on questionable practices at Diana Sullivan's gallery, featuring interviews with former employees and clients, Diana had become a pariah in the community she had once navigated so confidently. The article stopped short of outright accusations, but raised enough questions about both Diana's business practices and Nolan's authentication methods to ensure neither would work in fine art again without significant rehabilitation. What the article didn't mention, because no one had made the connection yet, was how precisely the gallery's collapse mirrored a failed development that had nearly bankrupted Victor 15 years earlier. Back then, Victor had trusted a business partner who, like Diana, had seen him as merely a stepping stone. That partner had manipulated financial records, diverted investors, and nearly destroyed everything Victor had built. Instead of breaking him, that betrayal had taught Victor his most valuable lesson. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford in business or, as it turned out, in marriage. 2 months after the emergency hearing, Victor received an unexpected visitor at his office. Nolan Prescott, looking considerably less polished than when they'd last met, sat nervously in the reception area. "You have 5 minutes," Victor told him, standing rather than inviting Nolan into his office. "Use them wisely." Nolan licked his lips. "I can give you Diana's journals. The real ones, not the fake abuse documentation. She recorded everything about her plan to take your money, about using me to help build a case." He lowered his voice. "She even discussed finding ways to access your personal accounts before filing for divorce." Victor's expression didn't change. "Why would you betray her now?" "The FBI is closing in on the art authentication issues," Nolan admitted. "I need to make a deal. Diana was the one who knowingly sold questionable pieces. I can prove she knew the risks and proceeded anyway." "So you're offering to throw Diana under the bus to save yourself?" Victor observed. "Just as she predicted you would." Nolan blinked in confusion. "What?" "Diana came to see me weeks ago," Victor explained. "She said you were planning to blame her for everything. It seems she was right about one thing at least." "She's lying," Nolan insisted. "We were in this together, but she was the driving force. I have proof." Victor checked his watch. "Your 5 minutes are up, Mr. Prescott. I suggest you take whatever proof you have to the FBI directly. I have no interest in becoming involved in your mutual betrayals." As Nolan was escorted out, Victor returned to his office and made a phone call. "He took the bait," he told Max. "Make sure the FBI gets an anonymous tip about those storage lockers in Prescott's name." What Victor knew, and Nolan didn't, was that Diana had indeed come to see him again, not to reconcile, but to offer up Nolan in exchange for financial clemency. Victor had declined her offer too, recognizing that the former lovers were now desperately trying to betray each other to save themselves. It was exactly the outcome Victor had anticipated when he'd first seen them kissing outside the hotel months ago. People who betrayed once would betray again when pressure was applied. His plan had simply been to ensure that pressure came from all directions simultaneously. The final divorce hearing was almost anticlimactic. With Diana's credibility destroyed and the prenuptial agreement now firmly upheld, the proceedings were brief. Diana received only what the prenup specified: a small cash settlement and her personal belongings, most of which had already been sold to cover living expenses. She sat alone on her side of the courtroom, Valerie having withdrawn as counsel weeks earlier when Diana could no longer pay her substantial fees. The confident, stylish woman who had once spat on Victor's shoes was gone, replaced by someone hollow-eyed and diminished. As the judge finalized the divorce, Diana caught Victor's eye across the courtroom, searching for some hint of the man she had married. She found nothing there but cold finality. Outside the courthouse, a reporter approached Victor. "Mr. Sullivan, do you have any comment on the FBI's arrest of Nolan Prescott for art fraud and your ex-wife's possible involvement?" "No comment," Victor replied, walking toward his car, where Pamela waited with his schedule for the afternoon. Behind him, he heard Diana calling his name, her voice breaking. He didn't turn around. That chapter of his life was closed. Chapter 7: New Alliances. 6 months after the divorce, Victor stood on the balcony of his Tokyo hotel suite, watching the city lights flicker like stars fall to earth. Sullivan Construction had expanded internationally, with new projects breaking ground across Asia. The company's value had nearly doubled. His phone buzzed with a text from Audrey Keller, the brilliant architectural engineer he'd hired to oversee the Asian expansion. They had developed an easy professional rapport that had gradually extended into dinners that ran late into the evening, discussing not just business but art, philosophy, and their respective views on integrity. "Tokyo Tower looks spectacular at night," Audrey had texted, along with a photo from her own hotel balcony 15 floors below his. "Better with company," he replied, surprising himself with the invitation implicit in those words. While he waited for her response, Victor reviewed a news alert on his tablet. Nolan Prescott had been sentenced to 7 years for art fraud, with additional charges related to money laundering still pending. Diana's name appeared in the article as a former gallery owner who cooperated with investigators, though her cooperation had come too late to salvage either her reputation or her freedom. After testifying against Nolan, Diana had been charged with lesser financial crimes. She had accepted a plea deal, 3 years probation, significant fines she couldn't pay, and community service. The last Victor had heard, she was working as a clerk in a frame shop in a small Idaho town, about as far from the glamorous art world as one could get. Victor felt no satisfaction in these developments, only a cold certainty that justice had been served. He had not ruined Diana and Nolan. They had done that themselves. He had merely ensured their actions had consequences. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Audrey stood there, elegant in a simple black dress, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. "I thought we might enjoy the view together," she said with a small smile. Later, as they shared wine on the balcony, Audrey asked the question most people were afraid to voice. "The divorce, the gallery collapse, Prescott's arrest. Did you orchestrate all of it?" Victor considered her for a long moment. I created pressure points, he finally said. What happened after that was the natural consequence of who they were. Audrey nodded, accepting this answer without judgment. My ex-husband cheated with my business partner. When I found out, I was so angry I could barely function. You seem so controlled. Anger is a luxury for people who lack patience, Victor replied. Revenge isn't about emotion. It's about strategy. Is that why you're here in Tokyo? Strategy? Victor looked out at the glittering cityscape. Partly, but also because life continues. Diana and Nolan were a chapter, not the whole story. Audrey touched his hand lightly. I like that philosophy. Too many people get stuck in their worst chapters. For the first time in over a year, Victor felt something like peace. Not happiness. He was too realistic to expect that so soon. But perhaps the potential for it somewhere in the future. Back in Montana, construction began on Victor's newest project, a modern art center built on the site of Diana's failed gallery. The irony wasn't lost on those who knew their history, though Victor described it publicly as simply addressing a community need. Local artists were thrilled by the facility's plans for affordable studio space and mentoring programs for disadvantaged youth. Precisely the kind of community engagement Diana had always dismissed as unprofitable. Among the center's first hires was Lisa Harlow, Diana's younger sister, who had been estranged from Diana for years due to what Lisa described as Diana's self-centered approach to family. Lisa had reached out to Victor after the divorce, initially to apologize for her sister's behavior, and eventually to discuss her own ideas for community arts education. Are you sure you want me involved? Lisa had asked when Victor offered her the position of education director. People will talk. People always talk, Victor had replied. What matters is what we build. The Sullivan Arts Center broke ground on a crisp autumn morning, with local officials and arts community leaders gathered for the ceremony. Victor stood slightly apart from the crowd, watching as Lisa eloquently described the center's mission to reporters. His phone buzzed with a text from Howard. Nolan Prescott requesting meeting. Claims to have important information. Advised against but thought you should know. Victor deleted the message without responding. Whatever game Prescott was playing from prison held no interest for him. That story was finished. Chapter 8. Unexpected Return. On the first anniversary of his divorce, Victor returned home from a business trip to find Pamela looking unusually concerned. Mr. Sullivan, there's someone waiting in your office. She insisted it was urgent and personal. Victor raised an eyebrow. She, Tessa Harlow, Pamela said. She says she's your former sister-in-law. Victor frowned. Diana had never mentioned another sister besides Lisa. Call security to stand by, he instructed, then headed to his office. The woman who rose from the visitor's chair was strikingly similar to Diana in coloring, but different in every other way. Where Diana had been polished and perfect, this woman had a natural, almost wild quality about her. Mr. Sullivan, she said, extending her hand. I apologize for the intrusion. I'm Tessa Harlow, Diana's half-sister. We've never met because I've been overseas for most of my adult life. Victor shook her hand, but remained standing. What can I do for you, Ms. Harlow? It's actually what I can do for you, Tessa replied, opening her bag and removing a thick manila envelope. Diana sent me these from Idaho with instructions to deliver them to you directly. Victor made no move to take the envelope. Whatever game Diana is playing now, I'm not interested. Tessa placed the envelope on his desk. I understand your reluctance. Diana and I have never been close, different mothers, different values. But she insisted these documents were important to you personally. She stepped back. My obligation ends with delivery. What you do with them is your business. After Tessa left, Victor stared at the envelope for a long moment before finally opening it. Inside were documents he immediately recognized. Ownership certificates for the 3 questionable Degas pieces from Diana's gallery. But these weren't the certificates Nolan had provided. These were authentic verification documents showing the pieces were legitimate, apparently suppressed by Nolan to artificially inflate their value through rarity. Along with the certificates was a handwritten note from Diana. Victor, these won't repair what I destroyed, but they might help you understand what really happened. Nolan convinced me the art world required strategic ambiguity to maximize profits. I was foolish and greedy enough to believe him. The paintings are real. The FBI investigation was based on falsified evidence, some of which I believe you might have provided. If you're reading this, you've won completely. I hope it brought you peace. Diana. Victor set the documents aside, unsure what to make of this development. If Diana was telling the truth and the documentation appeared genuine, then part of Nolan's conviction had been based on incorrect evidence. Victor had assumed the art fraud allegations were legitimate, focusing his efforts only on ensuring they came to light. The thought that he might have inadvertently facilitated false charges was uncomfortable. Victor Sullivan played hardball, but he had always prided himself on operating within ethical boundaries, even when seeking justice. He called Howard. I need you to verify some documents, and I need everything we have on the Degas authentication evidence. After a thorough investigation revealed Diana was telling the truth about the artwork, Victor faced a difficult decision. Correcting the record would help Nolan Prescott, a man who had still committed other financial crimes. Remaining silent would mean being complicit in a false conviction. Victor ultimately chose integrity over vengeance. He anonymously submitted the authentic certificates to the FBI with an explanation of their provenance. He made no effort to assist Prescott beyond ensuring the truth was available to authorities. The revelation did reduce some of Nolan's charges, though his sentence was only marginally affected due to the other financial crimes he had genuinely committed. More significantly, it created a public narrative that somewhat rehabilitated Diana's professional reputation, acknowledging that she had been manipulated by Nolan regarding the authenticity issues. When the news broke, Lisa confronted Victor in his office. Did you know about this? That the art was real? No, Victor said truthfully. I assumed Prescott's entire operation was fraudulent. Lisa studied his face. And now that you know it wasn't, at least not entirely, do you regret what happened to Diana? Victor considered the question carefully. I regret that she made choices that destroyed what could have been a good life. I regret that she valued money and excitement over integrity and commitment. But I don't regret ensuring that those choices had consequences. Lisa nodded slowly. You know, growing up with Diana was difficult. She always got what she wanted, usually at someone else's expense. You're probably the first person who ever truly held her accountable. That wasn't my goal, Victor said. I simply refused to be her victim. Later that week, Victor received another envelope. This one from his investigator. Max inside was a surveillance photo of Diana in Idaho, looking thin but composed, leaving the frame shop where she worked. The accompanying note read, "Thought you should know. She's been sober 6 months. Working 2 jobs to pay restitution. Locals say she volunteers teaching art to kids on weekends." Victor placed the photo in his desk drawer without comment. Diana's redemption arc, if that's what it was, had no bearing on his life now. She had made her choices, and he had made his. Chapter 9. The Final Calculation. 2 years after the divorce, Victor stood at the podium during the grand opening of the Sullivan Arts Center, delivering brief remarks to the assembled crowd of local dignitaries and arts patrons. This center represents my belief that communities thrive when creativity has room to flourish, he concluded. Thank you to everyone who helped make this vision a reality, especially our dedicated education director, Lisa Harlow. As applause filled the modern gallery space, Victor's gaze caught on a familiar figure at the back of the crowd, Tessa Harlow, watching him with an unreadable expression. She nodded once in acknowledgement before slipping out a side door. Later, as guests mingled during the reception, Victor found himself momentarily alone in the main gallery. Audrey had flown in for the opening, but was currently engaged in conversation with the center's architect across the room. Their relationship had developed gradually into something meaningful, a partnership based on mutual respect and shared values. Quite an achievement, a voice said behind him. Victor turned to find Tessa holding 2 champagne flutes. She offered one to him, which he accepted with a nod. Diana saw the write-up in the Idaho paper, Tessa said without preamble. The Arts Center built where a gallery once stood. She called it poetic justice. How is she? Victor asked, surprising himself with a question. Surviving, Tessa replied. Sober. Working. Trying to make amends where possible. She studied him. She asked me to deliver a message, though I told her you probably wouldn't want to hear it. And yet here you are, Victor observed. Family obligation, Tessa said with a slight shrug. She wanted you to know that she understands now what she threw away, what she destroyed. Not just the marriage, but her integrity. She said to tell you that you were right about everything, especially Nolan. Victor took a sip of champagne. Is that supposed to matter to me now? I don't think so, Tessa said honestly. Diana always believed her feelings should matter more to others than they actually do. I think this message is more for her benefit than yours. Part of her making amends to herself. Victor nodded, appreciating Tessa's directness. Thank you for delivering it. Tessa finished her champagne. There's one more thing, something I wanted to ask personally. The FBI agent who investigated Nolan told Diana that the evidence against him arrived from multiple anonymous sources, perfectly organized to build a comprehensive case. He said in 20 years, he'd never seen such methodical documentation of financial crimes. Interesting, Victor said non-committally. Diana believes you orchestrated everything. Not just her downfall, but Nolan's complete destruction. She thinks you mapped out every move months in advance, like some kind of chess grandmaster. Diana always did have an active imagination, Victor remarked. Tessa laughed softly. That's what I told her. No one could be that calculating, that patient. She set down her empty glass. But watching you tonight, seeing all this, she gestured around the gallery. I'm not so sure she was wrong. Victor smiled slightly. Life rarely offers perfect justice, Ms. Harlow. Sometimes we have to design it ourselves. As Tessa left, Audrey appeared at Victor's side. Everything okay? You looked intense. Just tying up loose ends, Victor replied, taking her hand. Nothing important. That night, after the successful opening, Victor sat alone in his home office reviewing plans for his next major project, a development that would transform an abandoned industrial district into affordable housing and small business spaces. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Congratulations on the center. You've built something meaningful from the ashes. D. Victor deleted the message without responding. Diana Sullivan belonged to his past, and he had no interest in bridging that gap. The woman who had once been his wife had made her choices, and he had ensured those choices had permanent consequences. That chapter was closed forever. As he turned back to his work, Victor reflected on the path that had led him here. He had not sought revenge in the traditional sense, hot-blooded, emotional, destructive. Instead, he had methodically ensured that justice was served, that betrayal carried appropriate costs, and that he emerged not just intact, but stronger. In the end, Victor Sullivan had not just survived betrayal. He had alchemized it into success, turning his enemies' weapons against them with a precision they never saw coming until it was too late. The empire they had tried to steal from him had only grown more substantial, and the man they had underestimated had revealed himself to be exactly what he had always been. Someone who would never forgive a betrayal, never forget a lesson, and never leave a debt unpaid. It was not forgiveness that had freed him, but the perfect execution of justice on his own terms. And in that execution, he had found, if not happiness, then something perhaps more valuable. Peace on his own terms, with no compromises and no loose ends. Victor closed his laptop and looked out at the Montana night sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new victories. The past was settled. The future belonged entirely to him. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.